What is your never interrupt an enemy while they are making a mistake moment? I was doing a mortgage for a French guy in Miami Beach that had a French realtor. Even though both were completely fluent in English, she frequently did asides in French, having no idea I spoke the language. When they settled on a property and we were riding the elevator down from the condo, she told him that, look, these guys are scumbags, and they're going to screw you over, and I have a much better person that you can work with, even though the way foreign investment works is identical throughout the state. Towards the end of the ride, I say to the guy in fluent French that we would be happy to compare our proposal with whatever her people could come up with, and it's his choice, but certainly we would like to work with him on this and any future investments. He starts laughing his ass off, and she was completely mortified. He went with us and fired her as his agent. On the spot. I let the lady who changed lanes into me run her mouth about how I rear-ended her before pulling the cop aside to show him my dashcam footage. I did the same thing, but for another dude. Right lane was gradually coned off due to fixing some potholes. Lady went all the way up to the last second, and then cut this dude off. He hit his horn, and she brake-checked him. Bam! This lady was, I don't even know, on the phone, hysterical about how this guy was screaming and threatening her, and she didn't feel safe. I waited for the cops to do their thing and then stepped up. They said, "Nah, we got what we need." I said, "Watch this. Uno reverse card." The scary part is they didn't care about the evidence. I once came upon a 2-car crash moments after it happened. They had both passed me going up a hill, crashed on the other side. When the police came, they talked to one couple and let them go, then came to talk to the other couple whom I was sitting with. Found out the first couple said she was driving. Thing is, when I came up she was in the passenger seat, and he was running away through a field. Too many cops are lazy. A woman sideswiped my wife trying to pass on the right in front of the police station, and kept going 1,000 feet or more down the street. The cop showed up and went to that woman first, and she lied about everything. Said the accident happened where she stopped. Said my wife made an illegal turn. All made up. When the cop came to talk to us, he wouldn't even listen to our side of the story. I told him what she said made no sense based on the damage to the car, and his response was, "Well, you see all kinds of things." I told him check your parking lot cameras and said there was no need to check them because the accident didn't happen in front of the police station, etc. I came so close to yelling at the cop. He tickets my wife, end of story. Later that night he calls my wife, says he decided to check the parking lot cameras after all and that my wife's version of the accident was the more truthful one. He took care of her ticket and tickets the other driver. Very frustrated about that. When a coworker who I hated got fired a few weeks after I decided to stop fixing his mistakes even if it impacted a client. On the one hand you don't want to be a snitch, but on the other hand you really shouldn't cover up other people's stupidity. Had a coworker who should have been fired a year earlier, but I kept stepping in. On at least 2 occasions I told myself that I had to shield the job from liability, when his personal and professional incompetence got people physically hurt. So I stepped in and smoothed things out, instead of letting him dig his own grave. When he eventually got fired, it took him 6 months to forget my phone number. Don't cover for stupid kids. Years ago I worked extremely hard on preparing a presentation for a tech conference. It would be my first speaking gig. I was nervous as fuck. I practiced. I refined. I got advice. I practiced some more. My manager was generally a nasty woman, but she was supportive of this, though she never once saw or heard my presentation. We traveled to Vegas. It turns out there was a far greater demand than they expected, so they moved us to the main stage room. They were expecting about 500 plus walk-ins. I was 10 times nervous as fuck. Well, immediately prior to the start, she noticed a very well-known media person and their photographer sitting in the front row. She got all excited and insisted that she was going to co-deliver it. She even went so far as to put her name on title slide. So, I of course was fuming. We go on stage, she does a decent intro, and then I start in. She keeps interrupting, so I just let her run with it. It reminded me of a morning show. A bunch of people, with overwhelmingly fake smiles talking over each other. This was a deeply technical topic with a live demo. She fumbled each slide worse than the next. And then she got to the live demo slide and froze. I had the wherewithal to let her die. It was gloriously brutal. We had a, let's say, confrontation after. I left within 2 to 3 mo's. She got fired shortly after. Oh, and the media people she was prancing for left immediately before the start. I think they were just sitting there from the prior session. Perfect. Guy stole a presentation from me. This is 25 years ago. We hated each other. When he started presenting, I realized I had made a huge error. Didn't say anything. Let him get through it. Asked him about the error. He couldn't answer. This was in front of COO. Got fired, not for just that, he was an overall douche. This was before everyone was on PCs, had one printer in one room. This was in front of COO. I always read this term as if there was a pigeon in a business suit who's in charge of the company. I bet he thinks you set him up. The same kind of person that will steal your food and then snitch on you for making your lunch super spicy. Not my story, but several years ago my older brother was fighting for custody of his son with his ex-wife. As the first custody hearing date approached, they were exchanging pleasantries over text, and my brother ended up saying something along the lines of, "I'm not continuing this conversation. I will see you on the 15th inch." The ex-wife told him, "The hearing is on the 25th, dumbass." So of course, instead of correcting her, my brother just allowed her to keep thinking it was the wrong date, and she missed the first hearing entirely. It became the first of many mistakes she made in the court system that eventually led to my brother and the woman who is now his second wife winning full custody of his son. Shit, I'd frame a picture of those two texts and send it to her on the anniversary of their divorce. At my current job, part of my duties is to do trailer audits, make sure people are loading safely, and I was training a new member for the position to do the job. After a few weeks, it turns out that the other person wasn't doing any aspects of the job. Instead, they were just mingling like it was a cocktail party. When asked why they weren't doing anything, they say it was because they were never trained. Well, turns out that due to past complaints about this particular person, management put them on a PIP, that if they got any type of training they were to have a piece of paper documenting what kind of training it was, who trained them, and management sign off, with all parties' signatures. When they pulled the file that said they were indeed trained in all duties of the job, they just sat there silent and were fired. They were fired because they pulled the same stunt in every department of the building, and mine was their last chance. I get fired from the only jobs that will take me at my age because I can't get yelled at by jerk customers without crying, and this dude got multiple chances? I was accused by a neighbor of reversing out my drive and hitting his car. He gave me the date and time I had allegedly done it, and pointed to a small scrape on my car that supposedly matched perfectly the location of the dent on his. This was 7 weeks after the alleged event, by the way. I said it wasn't me but told him to contact his insurance, and we'd see what they said. Few weeks later I get a letter from my insurance asking what had happened, to which I responded with the date I had bought my car, and updated my insurance, 2 weeks after the supposed bump. He never spoke to me again, but I used to give him a cheery wave every time I saw him glowering at his window. I have a somewhat similar story. I was backing out of my driveway and this crazy lady who lived in my neighborhood pulled into my driveway and hit my car. Luckily there was no damage, but she wanted to exchange insurance info. Later that day I get a call from her insurance agency asking me what happened. After I told them, there was a slight pause followed by, "She pulled into your driveway? We'll call you back." This was probably around 2001 or so, and they have yet to call back. Roommate's ex abandons their vehicle in front of my house. I tell them to please move it or I will have it towed. Vehicle suddenly has 2 flat tires. Ex files police report claiming my roommate and I had slashed their tires. Waited until X made their statement to the police about how we had slashed their tires and that is why they couldn't move his vehicle, and filed a claim against us in small claims court. Provided police and the court copies of my and our neighbor's door cam footage showing the X arriving in the middle of the night to slash their own tires. Cherry on top, X shows up in court wearing the same shirt as in the videos. Edit, while this blew up. Roommate and X had only been dating a few months. X turned out to be a grifter and was dating several people at the same time and using each of them for food, shelter, money, etc. I got involved when my roommate was out of town and the soon-to-be X just sauntered in. Apparently they had learned the code to the garage door, made themselves a sandwich, showered, slept, etc. I thought my roommate had come home early, but when I texted them, they were still out of state. The ex left to go out, and I changed the garage code. The vehicle wouldn't start, so they just left it there thinking it would be okay. Roommate and a few of the other people the ex was dating find out about each other, and they all dump them at once. I asked the ex to please move their car or I will have it towed. I give them 2 weeks. Later on I learned that the ex was having a mental breakdown, and they made some very poor decisions at that point. They broke into some of the other people's houses when they weren't home to do laundry, eat, sleep, and did some other things that got them in trouble with the law but are irrelevant to this story. The ex had no proof that anyone had slashed their tires. The cops just came to the door of me and our neighbors to see if there was any footage. There was, and they closed the case. I guess they never talked to me again about it. The court case was small claims court. The plaintiff has to pay a fee, file a form, have a summons issued to the defendant, and then you both show up in court with your evidence. The ex had no evidence other than a long list of real and perceived grievances with my roommate, but no actual proof, so the judge dismissed the case. I never got to show the video evidence to the judge, but I did share it with the clerk on their lunch break, and they were the one who pointed out that the ex was wearing the same shirt. During my very long and exhausting divorce, my ex-husband kept insisting he was ready to settle. We would schedule a conference with my lawyer and I, and then push papers around the table for 2 hours. He would just argue over petty details rather than actually discuss anything. This happened a few times. I was incredibly frustrated because I genuinely walked into this wanting to compromise so it would be over quickly. But that was never an option. Note that I hired a lawyer, and he did not. He was convinced he could do it on his own better. So after a few rounds of this, I got the impression that he was trying to waste my money until I could no longer retain my lawyer, and then he thought he would have the upper hand. I made less than half of what he did at the time, and my lawyer's retainer fee wiped out my entire savings, so it was a very real concern. My suspicions were confirmed when one day, as we were walking out of my lawyer's office, he told me this, word for word, while chuckling. I passed this on to my lawyer, who actually cackled and told me, "Let him." It was then that I learned that we were 6 months out from being married 10 years, and at that point, I would be entitled to a sizable part of his pension upon retirement. She let him play his games for 6 more months without saying a word, and then finally took our case before a judge 5 days after our 10-year anniversary. Not only did I get part of his pension, but she also got the judge to order him to pay almost all of my lawyer's fees. The beauty of it was that it 100% his fault for playing games. Not an enemy, but in retrospect should have been. I work as a teacher, and we had an ex-manager guy who decided to get into teaching late. He had lots of pretty horrible habits, eating other people's lunches, perving on the female teachers, squeezing people's shoulders painfully hard as a matey gesture. But the habit that this story is about is how he tried to use weaponized incompetence to get people to do his tasks for him. None of it was really important. He just seemed to enjoy talking people into doing things for him. So he comes up to me one day with a USB data stick in his hand. Apparently it has a copy of a previous year's exam that it was his responsibility to update and edit. He'd taken the file home and his daughter had done the update. Really, dude? Roping family into doing your paid government job for you? He wanted me to copy the file from the USB back into the server, replacing the original file he'd copied. It was literally click and drag between the USB and the file server. I flat out refused and said it was part of his responsibility, and I was too busy with my own tasks. He proceeds to loudly and publicly proclaim to the entire staff room that I didn't understand how difficult it was for people of his generation to learn computer technology, and that I really needed to help him out. That he was currently doing a computer course, but this, dragging a file between 2 folders, was too difficult for him to sort out. I let him go on for about a good 5 minutes about how horrible I was for not helping the poor helpless old man out, until I just as loudly asked him, "How the hell did you get the original file from the server onto the USB in the first place?" You could have heard a pin drop in that staff room. He walked off and copied his own goddamned file. In a meeting with my project manager, who has not been in the office or worked a proper full day for months, she has increasingly been annoyed by people bypassing her to get things done by telling me and her other direct reports what to do. I was about to answer a question for stakeholders. She told me to let her speak 1 sentence, and will let me have my bit. I did as I was told, and she told the stakeholder a completely wrong thing about the system we were handling and made a complete fool out of herself. She got sacked this month. It's so dumb but so fun. Years ago I worked in a cube farm office job and I hated my desk arrangement. It was right in a high-traffic pathway, with my back to everyone, screen facing out so anyone could just sneak up behind me lurking, peer over my shoulder while I worked, etc. Which really just bothers me. I was the first person in my department anyone would encounter, and I was also very good at what I did, so people would just see me first and interrupt me constantly all day. Well, the office got reconfigured, and me and a bunch of other people in that area worked in a big conference room for a couple days during the shuffle. The guy moving around all the cubicle panels was a good friend, so I told him to ping me the minute a back wall desk was finished so I could move my stuff there. He did, and I did. This other guy I was friends with saw what I was doing and followed me, so we claimed the back two wall desks across from each other. There was a super obnoxious senior developer who figured out way too late what was going on, and got very pissed. Apparently there was some old seating chart, which no one had followed at all as they redid the cube section by section, and it had him on a back wall. So he grabbed his old seating chart printout and marched into the senior VP's office right then and there to complain. I heard him ranting and raving about the chart this and the chart that. He needed to sit in the back to concentrate, blah blah blah. I just let him monologue for a minute or two because for some reason, he was exceptionally frantic about it. At the absolute perfect time, I got up to go to the break room, and as I walked by I poked my head in the office chuckling innocently and said, "Come on man, boss name is too busy for this silly stuff. I'll move my desk, who cares where we sit?" It was like a 5-second TKO. He immediately started stammering about how much he didn't care and how he insisted I just keep my stuff there, so I feigned indifference and said okay, no problem. It was one of my greatest moments in petty office politics. Ha! Make him look like a sniveling coward who couldn't even try to solve his own problem before running to the boss. Bet VP's opinion of him took a nosedive from that. To be fair, he got stiffed over. A seating chart was arranged and agreed to. Commenter used his insider connections to bypass it. You'd be miffed too if you agreed to something and then it just never happened. It's only cost this guy is telling the story that he doesn't sound like a bigger dickhead. An old boss who was awful to me after I took an extra few days of bereavement. She was just not smart, so I emailed her a recap of a meeting we'd had about said days off. She responded not only confirming what she'd said but throwing in a bit of racism. I escalated. I'd been at the company in a different location for 8 years with an outstanding track record, so I had some credibility. 2 to 3 weeks later my team was called into a last-minute meeting where her early retirement was announced, and my colleagues saw her crying in the parking lot later that day, her last day. I really don't hate anyone generally, but that made me so happy, and looking back I still hate her lol. How did racism find its way into an argument over bereavement time? Like, I'm honestly confused what she said that would simultaneously be racist, and, even somewhat, fit into a discussion over bereavement time. I've dealt with this before. Here are 2 examples. You race get too emotional over death. You should all learn it's part of life. Or, I don't know what your God says, but mine says heaven awaits you after death if you insert commitment. Our friend group had one guy I had personally cut off because he was a terrible drunk. Another friend of mine was having a cookout and decided to invite the guy I had cut off despite me saying he was going to do some stupid shit. Fast forward into 2 hours into the cookout, the friend I had cut off from my life got drunk and decided it'd be funny to sucker punch a guy with Asperger's. Everyone was telling him how big of a piece of shit thing that was to do, but he laughed and shrugged and played it off as no big deal, as the Asperger's guy was holding back tears. I didn't have to do a fucking thing. He showed everyone who he was. Everyone stopped fucking with him after that. Good riddance. Sucks for the dude who got punched though. At least he only hurt the guy. Dude could have ruined his life with one punch. Yeah, I'm not happy it happened at all. I may have left this part out by accident, but I told the host of the cookout not to invite that fucker like 3 times at least. Preface: I have always done my paperwork in blue Pilot G2 pen, not shilling. It's a very distinct color and hard to cover. Also, this will be a small novel. At one of my previous jobs I had just gotten my machine making product ready for packing. The only problem was the outer lip diameter was just too big, think 0.01 of an inch off. Nothing I did could get the diameter down. It was just too hot for the plastic to be formed smaller without cooling the die further, which was not then possible quality, and my supervisor quibbled about it for a while. It was decided, and hoped, the product would further shrink in storage as it continued to cool and set. So quality tech signed off approving the variants. Several months down the line, a couple customers complained lids aren't fitting right sometimes. Later found out only with hot foods or in hot environments. I get called into the front office for a final warning, a big quality alert. They ended up refunding anyone who bought product made by me, and a copy of the quality paperwork. Quality Tech is saying she never approved me running that product with the quality variants, and has a copy of my paperwork, proving it. I waited until everyone's spoken their piece, pulled out my pen, flipped the write-up over and wrote, "I refuse to sign this write-up because I do not deserve it." I then told them to go pull every quality sheet, every training sign-off, and even my job application and job offer and notice I write in blue ink. The quality sheet in front of me is a photocopy because all my writing is in black, not blue. Plant manager threw the write-up into the shredder and told me to go home for the day. I had already worked a 12-hour shift before this, and forget about this happening. He did not look amused. There was a new quality tech the next night I went in. TLDR, if you work in any field that requires regular paperwork, use a blue pen. I do the same thing. I work in aerospace manufacturing, with a stringent quality process, and I exonerated myself because I'm the only machinist who writes in blue. Amazing how our stories are parallel like that. But yours is 3x more epic. I'm working on a job site and the architect is there one day. I've been given some light fixtures for the sconces in a leasing office lobby. The fixtures are meant to be hung from a ceiling, they can't be installed on a wall. I attempt to convey this to the architect, but he brushes me off and just tells me to follow the prints. I turn to the apprentice and say, "Well, you heard the man, put them up." A bit later, we hear the crashing of glass. The architect asks what was that? I said, "Your light fixture," as I picked up a broom and dustpan to go clean up. Edit, told the apprentice to clean it up, of course. As an electrician as well, this happens so often. Wrong drawings given to us, we bring it up but get told, "I don't go off spec." Sounds good, chief, I'll follow it exactly, and you can tell me when the customer wants it changed. From a GC standpoint, this action puts the liability for the cost entirely on the design team and owner. I've given this direction to subs knowing full well how stupid it seems, but if I try to make a change then I'm not following contract documents, and can be financially liable for unforeseen issues. If I stop work to get correct information, then my company may be liable for the schedule impact. Let the architect and engineers see their own problem and figure it out. It's sort of a malicious compliance. There's a thing in law enforcement legalese called a spontaneous utterance. Many people will bury their own cases with these while bitching and moaning at their arresting officer on the way to jail. Can you give an example? Years ago, at the end of high school, I had a friend that was working at a shopco. Remember those? No, he was stealing from the till whenever he was put on a checkout. Eventually, he is clearly caught on camera pocketing cash, and the cops are called to arrest him in store when he showed up for his next shift. As he is handcuffed and lead out of the building, he yells, "You guys are idiots! I've been stealing from you for years!" Yeah, it didn't go well. I once served as an arbitrator in a hearing where Party 1 was alleging Party 2 committed fraud. An essential element of fraud is the intent to mislead as opposed to error or misunderstanding. Party 2 was admitting to the bad act but insisted it was accidental and had proof they received the wrong instructions. Party 1 then went on a long rant about how the very action of committing the act was fraud. He would not let his lawyer speak. During the rant, he eventually said something along the lines of, "I know Party 2 didn't do this on purpose. Boom, no intent, then no fraud." Hearing over. Reminded me of the Judge Judy episode where a young woman was suing two guys for stealing her purse. They denied taking it. Judy asked her what was in the purse, and she said something like, "Makeup, gift cards, and headphones." The defendant spoke up and said, "There weren't any headphones in it, Your Honor." Judy laughed at them and then found in the plaintiff's favor. "Oh my God, is he going to the hospital? Is he gonna be okay? I was just texting my friend, I never thought it could end up this way. Enjoy the vehicular manslaughter charge. I don't understand. I hit her in my house, why am I arrested? In my country, a lot of immigrants from primarily Islamic nations come from places where disciplining their wives is normal, or that basically they do whatever they want in their own home. Lots of confusion here. He lied to me and didn't replace my transmission with a new one, he just swapped it out. Of course I'm gonna make him give me my money back. Why isn't he in trouble? He is gonna be in trouble and you can sue him. Doesn't mean you're allowed to brandish a gun at him to force him to give you cash. Goddamn piece of shit deserved every cut I gave him. Oh cool, so you admit you cut him up with a knife. Also it works as an exception to hearsay if a witness, 911 caller, anyone basically blurts out information. Passenger is heard saying, "Holy shit, we're gonna crash, slow down." Witness or passerby shouts, "He's crazy, he's throwing bottles at the cashier," etc. When I was a teenager, a cousin of mine, Jenny, had a fight with her mom, Jackie. The fight was so intense that Jackie beat Jenny severely, so she called mom and dad asking for help and asked to live here for a while. At the time that sounded horrifying, but we quickly learned that Jenny was full of fucking shit. Jenny was a drama queen, loved to stir up trouble, lied constantly about basically everything, and Jackie never laid a hand on her. We had heard rumors but dismissed them and believed her. Until one incident. Mom always kept a few frozen pies in the freezer, just in case company came over. Jenny took a pie from the freezer one day, ate the entire damn thing, and when Mom came home, she got angry because those pies were for company. She asked Jenny who ate the pie, and she said, "I did." She yells for me. I come into the kitchen, she asks if I ate the pie. I said no, and get yelled at for eating the pie. Jenny then proceeds to launch into telling this overly elaborate tale about how I took the pie and ate it just to get her in trouble. She went on for like 3 minutes, and Mom just kept getting angrier and angrier at me, while I couldn't help grin like a madman. 3 minutes later she finishes her story and I point something out. It was a coconut cream pie she ate. I despise coconut. I hate it and will never eat it. Mom knew this, and the realization hits her. Jenny gets a look of horror in her face. She got grounded for a month. The look of both of them is seared in my mind. Makes me smile when I think of it. The funny thing is, she tried it again 2 months later, this time eating a chocolate cream pie, but Mom didn't believe her. Never tell the same lie twice. Eileen Garrick. Oh boy, this was college drama. My husband still had a year of college to go after I graduated, so I got an apartment in town, but he had his own room with some friends on an on-campus apartment, and after casually asking around, his roommates were cool with me basically living there so long as I helped with chores, which we found to be a great deal as my apartment was a tiny goddamn closet with shared bathrooms and kitchen. If I had to share, I wanted it to be with people my own age who I knew. Well, halfway through the year, a roommate moves out to study abroad and one of the other roommates' girlfriend moves in. She seemed nice and the two of us had a lot in common and ended up friends. Or so I thought. A month and we get confronted by an RA. There's been a complaint that involves everyone about my stay. This took absolutely everyone by surprise except the couple. Yeah, they tattled on me to the RA. Never once talked to me. Never brought it up. Meeting happens and the couple are late. They arrive and we start storytelling. The RA's face went from mild disapproval towards me to downright disbelief and annoyance at the girlfriend as she talked herself in circles about how, yes, she knew about me before she agreed to move in and was okay with it, but she had feelings, you know. Those feelings? Those vague-ass feelings? She was also paranoid as fuck because the RA flat out asked her if she tried talking to myself or my husband about it, and she said no, absolutely not. Why? She had one experience in the past with a completely unrelated person, so she just couldn't. Because feelings. Her asshat boyfriend just sat there silent, only saying once that he never liked the idea but never spoke up because he didn't want to ruin the apartment vibe, which was ruined by him anyway, so, yeah. All the while I was perfectly calm and even said it was okay. If they had a problem with the arrangements, I would have happily just stayed in my apartment with my husband visiting. Literally everyone else was telling the RA how completely out of the blue this was. So the RA, who is very fed up with them, tells me that per bylaws I can't actually be in the apartment unless I'm someone's guest. To which the 3 other roommates immediately say that if my husband isn't home, I can be their guest. One of them is nearly almost always home. The RA agrees. The couple's faces were honestly hilarious. And after that, no one in the apartment liked them. They basically hid in one room for the rest of the year. She did attempt to patch things up with me by gaslighting the whole situation, but I just laughed at her and told her she showed her true colors and I wanted nothing to do with her. She was genuinely shocked. As I was being fired from a job, the district manager requested we record the conversation. He thought I was gonna be very upset, so I obliged. Then when he started to tell me why I was being fired, he started with, "You are gonna be graduating college soon, and we want to make sure we get ahead of you leaving us." I very calmly asked he send me the recording right after he said that. Then later that day I called a lawyer. I now have no student loan debt. Edit. To give context, I was able to win litigation due to breach of contract. I don't feel like the internet is the right place to go into further detail. When I practiced family law, I saw this often on the stand. Turns out if your opponent is crazy most of the time, all you need to do to reveal that is give them a microphone and mildly question their story. The best, however, was in motion to withdraw hearings. For context, I hated these hearings. I dreaded them. I already felt like a failure for having to withdraw from a case, 95% of the time because the client wouldn't pay me, but sometimes because they turned out to be uncooperative and/or combative with me. They were not difficult to win, however. Inevitably, if I simply asked the ex-client when and how they intended to write their retainer, they'd start listing off excuses about how they don't and never will have the money to do so. It's heartbreaking, but it also proves my point. The clients who were uncooperative, however, were the best. I'd read off a list of times they cursed me out, ignored my advice, and threatened me and my staff, then just wait. You could watch their blood boil on the stand, followed by completely unhinged justification as to why no lawyer could reasonably work with this person. "Mr. Jones, can you explain why you threatened to shove a phone up my paralegal's ass if she called you again? She calls me every fucking week with another fucking thing that I have to do. You're supposed to be handling my case. It's why I hired you. I don't have time to be searching through my emails and getting bank records and bringing you papers every damn day. And every time my retainer is empty for like a day, she calls to remind me to refill it. I've got other things to pay for, like the damn child support you put on me when I left. How rude can you be, right? Right. I swear if I have to hear her damned voice one more fucking time, I'm going to drive over there and slap the shit out of her. Your Honor, I rest my case." I used to live in an apartment that had a very old lease. College students basically passed this place's lease down like inheritance until it came to us, and legally, the landlord could only increase the rent yearly by a small fraction of the current lease's rent. The exceptions to this were if the apartment was being renovated, in which case it would be her responsibility to accommodate us while renovating, or if it had been vacant for a year between leases. She knew our lease's rent was extremely low, and so wanted to get rid of us and jack up the rent on a new tenant. She sent us a letter about 2 weeks before our lease would be renewed saying she was renovating and we'd have to leave. Well, it happened my roommate was not just a college student, but a law student, and he happened to know she had to give us a lot more notice than that. So we plainly told her we weren't leaving and she'd be welcome to take us to court. Which she did. She told the judge she wanted to renovate, and the judge asked her for the new floor plan and a cost estimate of the proposed renovation. She had none of those things. When the judge asked why, she said she'd only decided to renovate a week prior. When the judge asked why she'd taken this decision after the legal deadline, 6 months' notice are required to end a lease, she said she was only renovating so she could start a new lease on the property. The judge literally facepalmed at her response, dismissed the case, and renewed our lease with no rent increase for the year, since she hadn't presented us a new one with enough delay to contest it. We were just sitting there with our mouths open, bewildered that she could have been dumb enough to say the quiet part out loud straight to the judge. I reminded my ex-wife the divorce court was the next day, and was invited to get fucked. So I went by myself. She failed to appear and pissed of the judge so that he asked what would be my desired outcome for assets and custody of the kids. He wrote down whatever I wanted and I could hear her screams when she read the orders from 3,500 kilometers away. I was working as a cub reporter in a small town and had done a piece on stray dog menace in some area. Plenty of dogs had attacked kids in a short while. The dog lovers of the town took that piece as I hate all dogs article. They shared it in their WhatsApp group and started talking trash about me. What they did not know was that the admin of the group ran a dog shelter, and a few months back, I had done a piece on the shelter, so I was in the group too. At one point, they began scheming that they'd cook up stories about me lying in the story and complain to the publication. Mind you, these are upstanding citizens, doctors, lawyers, senior executives. so their word had weight against a rookie reporter. I just showed the chat to the editor. He had a good laugh about it. Never knew what happened after that, but hours later, they stopped bitching about me. The admin of the group apologized to me separately. He didn't need to, but never did tell them that I was a part of it. My wife was a school teacher with 20 years under her belt. She was paired with a co-teacher for what we used to call the special ed students. Wife and co-teacher did not get along. It got to the point where wife and co-teacher, and their respective bosses, were sent to mandated mediation. Near the end of the mediation session, co-teacher asked the mediator, "So what's the next step if this doesn't work?" Turns out, the next step is, the one without tenure gets let go. Did they stop behaving like an asshat? Nope. Co-teacher got reassigned to somebody else the next year, pissed that person off too, and let go. As a CPS worker at the time, speaking to a father with police present in a case concerning substance use, and the father admitting being high on meth, and thinking the cops were there to arrest his daughter for stealing his meth, admits to me that she stole it because he let her have some, because if I didn't give it to her she'd go be a prostitute to get it. Just an entire 45-minute conversation with the guy having no apparent awareness that he had just told a CPS worker and 2 cops that he, 1, is currently high on meth, 2, routinely provides meth to his daughter, 3, has meth in his trailer behind him, 4, his daughter had been at the trailer with him while meth was in the trailer, 5, the meth was stored where she could easily access it, and she knew where it was, 6, he used meth with her. Just unfathomable levels of, I'm struggling to believe this conversation is happening, and afraid if I say anything he'll come to his senses and shut up. I was a lead developer in a small company producing IoT devices. My manager hired his friend from his previous company, a guy who was super arrogant and knew everything better. Theoretically, my opinion on the development of the project should be decisive, but neither my manager nor his buddy cared about it. I tried to talk to the manager about the problems with the new colleague, but he brushed me off. The new guy, being so brilliant, was given one important component of the system to do. Of course, he made it clear that he didn't need any help from me. Weeks and months passed. In the meetings, his component was always in the last phase of testing. But I had access to the Git repository, and I saw how messy it was. No one asked me for my opinion, so I didn't say anything. I waited. The deadline has come, the release of the product. And of course nothing works. Higher management became interested in the case, and my manager could only avoid being fired in one way: he fired his buddy. A few weeks later, I left the company. That was over a year ago, and as far as I know, the product still hasn't hit the market. I worked in a countrywide company, and needed something done by a peer in another office. She was very uncooperative and was arguing with me that she should not do what I was asking because it was not the correct procedure. It was, in fact, the correct procedure as per my boss, who was her boss, but before I could tell her where I had gotten my instructions, she took it upon herself to send me a very condescending email, CCing her boss and mine. She was clearly trying to put me on the spot for being wrong. I just waited until both her boss and mine told her that I was right, and I was just sitting there thinking, why are you making this so hard on yourself, girl? Not mine, obviously, but the Space Shuttle Challenger engineer that knew it would explode, Bob Ebling. He repeatedly said the cold weather would cause a failure despite pressure from NASA administration. He describes then as making the best decision of his life, refusing to sign the paper indicating he approves of the launch, forcing his boss to do it. At the governmental inquiry after the death of the astronauts, NASA said, the engineers signed a paper approving the launch that day, which, yeah, that's true, but worded as deceptively as can be. Bob then stood up, walked to the hearing, said that he personally refused the launch, but was overruled to the stunned members of the hearing. The government fired the NASA execs and made Bob head of the investigation. I was an attorney. Other side sues my client alleging he missed work for FMLA-protected reasons, and his termination was wrongful. I look up plaintiff in public records database, and see that he had court dates on all of the days he missed work. Instead of immediately confronting plaintiff to give him time to change his story, I depose plaintiff and have him walk me through every minute of every day he missed work. He leaves out the court part. A month after the deposition, after the time passes when the deposition can be corrected, I send plaintiff's lawyer printouts of the court records with the relevant dates highlighted. along with the paperwork to voluntarily dismiss the case, and a letter stating that any further action in the case will result in a motion against him for bad faith litigation. Don't hear a peep from the lawyer, but get the dismissal order from the judge a week later. 10 years ago, I had a coworker everyone found pretty annoying. She was an idiot who thought she knew better than everyone else, and would get offended at every opportunity. She took something I said the wrong way one day and got really upset, and I just didn't say anything. I would not indulge her insanity. So she quit, grabbed her stuff, and walked out on a job she'd had for years. No one spoke a word to stop her. My ex-boss was a complete douche in every aspect. We worked as surveyors using drones to scan and survey large areas, and he would go out of his way to get the cheapest and least reliable drones to do the job. One of those drones was this god-awful fixed wing, shaped like a plane with only one propeller, that you launch using this shit slingshot system that had a 50% chance of just launching the thing nose down into the ground. I told him this thing's a piece of shit. I even recorded my launches with it so he could see this thing was a piece of shit, but he insisted I was just a shit pilot who couldn't take off a DJI to save my life. After 3 crashes, 2 rolls of duct tape, and a few arguments, he decides to come with to the next big job we have and just do it himself. Now the turnover times for these jobs were insane. The man had zero concept for how long shit takes, so he promised the clients the data the very next day, which meant that everything would have to go perfectly the day of the flight, with 0 delays, so I could process the data overnight and have it ready for them the next day. No room for errors, no second chances. Every morning it was make or break. So we get to the site in the early morning, and I'm completely hands-off. Normally I'd pack a second drone for when this one inevitably kamikazes into the earth, but this time, I decide he needs a slice of humble pie. I watch as he sets up the drone, runs through the checks, loads it onto that god-awful fucking slingshot, and gets ready to pull the trigger. I take a few steps back, take out my phone to record, and watch the fireworks. He pulled the lever, and the bungee cord released. It whipped the drone 10 feet into the air at Mach 2, before the thing nose-dived right into the ground, breaking off one of the wings. After about 2 seconds of teetering on the ground, the drone's autopilot thought to itself, "Hey, that was a launch, wasn't it?" and automatically kicked the propeller into high gear, shattering it against the cold, unforgiving ground. He just watched the whole thing happen with a dead look in his eyes. Once the drone settled down and the death throes stopped, he picked up the drone, walked back to us, and said, "Well, shit." The 4-hour drive back to the office was completely silent, and our boss had to call the client and explain why we wouldn't be delivering the data to them on time. We had another job we had to do the next day, so they'd only have it next week. I could hear the client screaming to him over the phone from the next room. Needless to say, we never used that drone again. He never stopped buying shit drones, but when I told him they were shit, he believed me. It was during one of the many times my brother was annoying the shit out of me. He would often bother me until I was literally crying and begging him to stop by walking into my room and screaming, slamming my door, or just putting his trash in my room to pick up. It would go from just getting annoyed and telling him to get out because I was busy or trying to relax to getting worn out by his nonsense to literally having a breakdown because it just won't fucking end and my mom wouldn't do shit about it. Well, one day I was in the middle of another mental breakdown where I was literally just crying curled up in a ball trying to calm down after he threw something at me. And I guess he didn't hear it, but my dad was coming up the stairs as he was about to go back to my room and continue with his daily tormenting. I heard my dad coming up the stairs and just stayed quiet and tried to calm down as my brother started to scream again, laughing his annoying ass off after a few moments when I just covered my ears. After he finished screaming, my dad pulled him out of my room and grounded him right then and there, gave him a stern talking to, then made him go downstairs and do a bunch of chores while he calmed me down. That was one of the first time he was caught and stopped, since my dad was always at work and my mom didn't give a fuck, and my dad took it very seriously to the point where every time he caught him doing that again he would ground him for weeks at a time, and the stuff he got grounded from was pretty damn creative. A former coworker decided to blast profanity at me for having used a company truck typically assigned to him from the night prior. His biggest problem was that I destroyed the seat with my big fat ass. I calmed down as much as I could and called my supervisor, who rushed over and sat us both the company office. With the exception of a few head nods and yes answers, I let my coworker dig himself deeper and deeper. He was a very loud and bombastic character, so it was easy. Supervisor advised him to collect his personal belongings and take a few days off to cool down. He was then fired after 3 days' rest. As for the truck seat, I forgot to reset the lumbar support on the seat. Local Electoral District Association meeting was expected to be a largely pro forma renomination of the previous candidate, my boss, when a former candidate decides to throw his hat in the ring. Starts giving this long diatribe about how much support he has locally. He lost his prior race by 3x the margin we lost by, and starts rambling. You know when someone starts talking faster instead of making a point? It was that. Boss texts me to say, "You can feel free to interrupt and move for a vote." I reply, "One SEC, I have a feeling he's gonna say something stupid," right as he lets slip a racial slur against my boss. For context, boss was Indian, Prev candidate was Chinese. Both second generation. District didn't lean heavily in either direction. Needless to say, once he realized what had happened, he made the smart choice and withdrew. I've written about this before, but my half-sister moved in with my ex-husband the day I moved out. They swore they weren't sleeping together. I didn't ask, they told me without prompting. So I saw no reason to tell my ex that my sister had herpes. After all, they said they weren't sleeping together. Guess who was on Valtrex 2 months after the divorce? Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.